You're to find and slay the Prince Aemond Targaryen.
What if we can't find him?
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. House of the Dragon Season 2 is finally back. This will be my full Episode 1 video. Who is ready to commit some war crimes this season? Seriously, they started off with one of the most WTF moments from the books they could have. Like, they wanted to start off with a banger, wasting no time. There are a ton of Easter eggs and references, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, I'll be doing videos for all the episodes this season, just like I did for Season 1, for the main show. Be sure to subscribe to get everything. Also, because a lot of you have been requesting it, I'm bringing back face cam for a lot of these episode videos. Pay no attention to that Magneto helmet. George R. R. Martin said it's period accurate. It could totally stay. Matt Smith also just revealed they're going to be filming Season 3 later this year, so hopefully they'll get it out faster rather than later. The actual episode title was A Son for a Son, which is clearly a reference to Daemon's line during the episode where he orchestrates the events that will become known as Blood and Cheese in retaliation against the Greens for the death of Lucerys. R.I.P. to him and R.I.P. to baby Jacerys. The show made a couple changes to the way Blood and Cheese goes down from the original Fire and Blood books, but that's the whole vibe of the show itself. It's meant to provide extra context for what actually happened, like the truth of history versus the Fire and Blood book, which is a third-party account written by Maester Gildain in Mushroom from his accounts, which are often unreliable. Ryan Condal also revealed that when he was working with George R. R. Martin, the way that George R. R. Martin described the Fire and Blood book is that it's more of unreliable narration and very green-leaning account, which is why it portrays Rhaenyra in very poor light during times in the books. Apparently the Maesters, not real big fans of Rhaenyra. But ultimately, the events of Blood and Cheese go down the same way the ultimate death of Helaena and Aegon's son, Jacerys. And since the show is meant to be the truer version of events, the full context we get for Blood and Cheese is that originally it was all about getting Aemond's head for Lucerys, getting revenge against Aemond by killing him. But when they actually came to do the deed, sneaking through the Red Keep, they couldn't find Aemond. So instead, Blood and Cheese, who already kind of messed up in the head, like already pretty mad, just decide, well, she's good enough, these babies are good enough, we'll go for them. He asked for a son, we'll give him a son. This actually flies in the face of the long-held belief, based on the books that we've had up to this point, that Daemon and Mysaria specifically ordered that it be one of her children. So it kind of makes Daemon and the Blacks seem slightly less despicable. They didn't want things to go down like this, but this is the way it happened, which is also similar to what happened with Aemond and Lucerys during Season 1. Like, he didn't try to kill him like it was an accident, but that's not what Aemond says when he comes back to the Red Keep. The Dance of the Dragons, just in general, not just Season 1, but Season 2, future seasons, is mostly about a bunch of different people inside the family doing terrible things to each other. You're not really meant to truly align with any one side, but based on the way things go down episode to episode, particularly this episode, they really do want to sympathize both sides in different ways more. Like, they want you to sympathize a little bit more with the Greens after what happens in this episode. That will not always be the case, though, because what happens in Episode 1 basically drives everything that happens later this season. Like, it's all about retaliation, escalation on both sides. One of the first major changes everybody will recognize instantly for Season 2 is that they changed the entire intro scene. Now, instead of the model of the Valyrian freehold with the blood flowing down to represent the Targaryen family tree leading from Aegon the Conqueror, like the blood of ancient Valyria, is a tapestry you'd see hung on a wall depicting the actual, more literal family tree, like the ones they'd hang up around Dragonstone, the Red Keep, before Alicent found religion during that time jump and got rid of all their Targaryen paraphernalia designs all over the Red Keep. One of the funny details the showrunners revealed during Season 1 too is that Viserys, because he was such a nerd for Targaryen and Valyrian history, is that a lot of the tapestries that he had hung around his room particularly were dragons getting out, like humping each other. As you can imagine, Alicent, not a huge fan of dragons humping each other everywhere she looks. The whole reason they said they changed the intro this significantly is because each time during Season 1, they'd only update the Valyrian freehold model when somebody new was born, and up to this point now, Season 2 going forward, nobody else is born essentially. Like, everybody that was going to be born has already been born. So we wanted a better way to visualize the family tree together in changing that episode to episode. They really only give us a taste in this episode, but they wanted to remind you about the White Walkers, the Night King, the Long Night. But if the show winds up going for, say, like 4 seasons, they probably just stay with the tapestry intro and change that when people die. During the original show, they changed the intro episode to episode, mostly based on where you went because it was a literal map representation. Personally, I think that the original show intro is still peak. It has not been topped yet, but the intro for House of the Dragon Season 1 was still pretty cool. You guys can let me know which intro you prefer. For the most part, the tapestry itself follows the same logic as the original Valyrian Freehold 3D model with the blood. Like, you start with ancient Valyria, the doom, like you see all the dragons here, the death of the dragons, the 14 flames blowing up, the doom of Valyria, essentially. Daenerys the Dreamer getting the dream, Aenys Targaryen taking his dragons, all of the Targaryens' holdings, and going to Dragonstone before the doom goes down. Then the rise of Aegon the Conqueror, the Conquest, you see Maegor the Cruel here, eventually then Jacerys and his wife Alysanne. They're also mentioned later in the episode. The division of the Blacks and the Greens, then Aegon on the Iron Throne, Rhaenyra separately on her throne on Dragonstone. In the way they depict the ending as if the tapestry is being woven inside the Iron Throne room in view of the throne itself. The actual opening scene of the episode starts with Cregan Stark and Jacerys up at the north. Welcome back, House Stark. It's been so long. We saw a House Stark cameo briefly during Season 1, Episode 1. Cregan's father, Rickon Stark, for whom young Rickon later in the timeline winds up being named on the main show, can be seen swearing fealty to Rhaenyra after she was named the heir, with the other lords of the realm also bowing to her, which they kind of reneged on. Like, that's why we're in this whole situation now. There's a special ceremony that Cregan created at the beginning of winter each season. 1 in 10 men inside his forces are chosen to fortify the wall, including members inside the line of succession to the Stark family. Jacerys references the time Torrhen Stark bent the knee to Aegon the Conqueror during the actual conquest. Cregan references how his father Rickon brought King Jacerys and Alysanne and their dragons Vermithor and Silverwing to the wall, and how the dragons refused to cross the wall because they were afraid of the Night King and the White Walkers. There was a ton of plot that happened up in the north around House Stark, Winterfell during Season 1, but the show just completely skipped it all. It happened during the time jump between Episode 5 and Episode 6. I'll probably do like a separate video talking more about that. You could go on for like an hour talking about all the stuff that the show skipped over. Rickon passed away during that time jump, and at the time Cregan was only about 13 years old, so the title Lord of Winterfell passed to him naturally as it would, but Rickon's brother Bernard Stark served as his regent while Cregan was still very young growing up, and as he got older, just refused to let go of that power, causing their own little civil war in the north. As you can see clearly, Cregan I became Lord of Winterfell proper, wound up marrying his childhood sweetheart, where we see him now up at the wall with Jacerys. This is one of the reasons why he's so sympathetic to Rhaenyra, why he pledges his fealty to her again, or sort of reaffirms Winterfell's fealty to her. Because the same basic thing is happening to Rhaenyra with someone else trying to usurp her rightful Iron Throne. Also, the idea that Cregan Stark has a very Ned Stark-like sense of duty and honor, and because Rickon swore the oath of fealty to Rhaenyra so many years ago, Cregan feels honor-bound to uphold that oath. When Episode 1 picks up in present day, it's only been about 10 days since the end of Season 1, so not much time has gone by. Like, everybody's still grieving for a bunch of different characters. Add a couple new ones to that list by the end of the episode. But in that 10 days, Jacerys sealed the alliance and obviously traveled north to the wall, so we also get the Easter eggs and references to the Night's Watch, the White Walkers, the Night King. The show doesn't really have a lot of time to spend up there, but they're just reminding you that that's a big concern in the background. One of the things that Rhaenyra is really worried about. Tom Taylor is playing Cregan Stark. You can detect a little bit of that northern accent, like he's trying to do his best Ned Stark, best Jon Snow type of accent there. You get that sense of duty and honor for him that's sort of baked into all the Starks just in general. We get to see another resupply run with them taking more men to the Night's Watch to Castle Black, and while they're there, he also gives Jacerys a bit of a PowerPoint tutorial on how the Night's Watch works. Because if it wasn't clear during Season 1, they didn't really get into it. Jacerys had never been to the wall before. Notice he's also carrying ice on his back, the Valyrian greatsword of House Stark. It hasn't been melted down by Tywin yet later in the timeline. R.I.P. Ned Stark. He's also wearing that similar northern armor, basically the same type that Jon Snow wore later in the timeline, because that's just the type of armor that they wore in the north across the ages. We see the direwolf sigil in the middle of his chest, and while he's giving this big speech about honor in the Night's Watch, they're also playing some of the theme music from House Stark and the main show. It's a slightly different version, like Ramin Djawadi updated for this episode, but it's meant to evoke a lot of the vibes of House Stark from the original main show. A lot of people will be asking about what's going on with the Night King during this episode when they're looking out over the wall. Like, is he around? Are the White Walkers active? They're still mostly just in the lands of Always Winter, probably running brief raids to actually boost their numbers. There are probably people making sacrifices to them during this part of the timeline in the north, like Craster, for instance, good example. Craster would not be born yet during the events of this show, but you still have people like Craster in the north that are making sacrifices to them. And generally, one of the reasons why the Night King was not as active during this particular period is because there are so many dragons. There's a very important event that will happen during the events of this show and future seasons that we'll talk about because it'll involve the small folk in King's Landing, but it's probably the major reason why the Night King just waited a hot minute until that big event happens before he started marshaling his forces again. You have to remember the dragons are fire-made flesh. They're like nuclear weapons, and right now the Targaryen family has many of them, even though they're in the middle of this civil war right now. So if the Night King and the White Walkers were to suddenly show up at the wall to try and break through, they fly all their dragons up north, unify, civil war is over, and they waste the Night King easily. He knows this, that's why he's biding his time.
Winter is coming.
In winter it'll cover all you see, and all memories of warmth will be forgotten.
We also get a chance for a callback to the whole idea that winter is coming in the long night on the main show. We will see plenty of House Stark in future seasons. They're a much bigger part of the story later during the Dance of Dragons. Their scene up on the wall looking out over the north is also meant to be a direct parallel to Jon Snow on the main show doing the same thing with Benjen during season 1. There's a lot of book plot of things that Jacerys also did while he was up in the north hanging out with Cregan Stark. Like, they became real bros. He supposedly got secretly married to Sarah Snow, his bastard sister, Cregan's bastard sister. There's a lot of rumors about him having a love child with her, but the show doesn't have a lot of time to actually spend on that. So I'll probably add that to one of my bonus videos later this week and talk about it a little bit more. Because they are blowing through plot really fast this season, and probably one of my biggest complaints of the season so far, even though we're pretty early on, is that they cut 2 episodes. It's only going to be 8 episodes instead of the usual 10. Then Jace gets word from Dragonstone about what happened to Lucerys with orders to return home. We get a much better look at the entrance of the Dragonmont here. Corlys Velaryon comes to see Alan Hull, one of his bastards, but it's not clear if Alan knows that he's one of Corlys's bastards, but we get some backstory between the two of them, like he's been working with his fleet for a long time, and he's the one during the events of Season 1 who personally saved Corlys's life when we saw him return to Dragonstone. When he mentions his brother, that's Corlys's other bastard, Adam Hull, who winds up riding Silverwing, becoming one of the other Dragonseeds. We meet a couple of them during this episode. Notice how the Kingsguard and the Castle Guard have all their colors changed to green for Aegon and the Greens. They make it a point to show them manning the Scorpion because during this period in history, there was a lot more knowledge of how to actually fight dragons. And we jump to King's Landing to show you what's going on with the Greens after the Season 1 finale. And surprise, surprise, goody goody two-shoes, Alicent is totally getting it on with Criston Cole. It's basically meant to herald the beginning of the downfall from her being this very prim and proper persona, like the mask that Alicent had been wearing her whole life, where she spent all this time being a bastion of tradition, following rules, doing anything people told her to do, including the small council of Viserys and her father. But you can kind of see her whole relationship with Sir Lord Weird Footstuff is kind of been grating on her whole, like all these sacrifices that she's made, these personal sacrifices. And ultimately she finds that it leads to nothing for her, like being a good girl her whole life got her nothing, nowhere. After Aegon is crowned, very clearly he stops listening to her, has no intention of doing what she says or listening to her suggestions at all. Everyone on the Green Council kind of derides, ignores her. Nobody seems like they even care what she has to say or what she thinks. Aemond even makes fun of her during the trailers like she's a fool. So the idea with Alicent this season is that she no longer feels like she has any purpose in her life. Nothing matters. So she starts to give in to her baser instincts, which leads to her getting it on with Criston Cole. There were a lot of theories about this during Season 1 because in the books, there is no mention of her ever getting it on with anybody after the death of Viserys. Clearly that is not the case. She is DTF now. And even during Season 1 up to this point, it seemed like Criston Cole had been simping for her ever since Rhaenyra turned down his offer of running away to Essos together. Like he's been punishing her ever since on a low level, like holding this grudge against her. You kind of saw this weird relationship forming between the two of them, but I don't think that she ever actually did anything with him until very, very recently. Like episode 1 here is probably the beginning of them getting it on. When they're entering the council room, this is cheese, just like an early teaser. Notice the map of Westeros in the background they have for war planning. Aegon also makes Tywin Lannister give Jacerys a pony ride until Alicent stops him. We find out Rhaenyra's blockade using Corlys's ships is causing food shortages in King's Landing, which will cause problems with the small folk later this season. That'll become more important later, like you see all the riots during the trailers, that's what that's about. They also mention the Greyjoys, like they're bringing the Greyjoys back into the story, as Dalton Greyjoy, the Lord of House Greyjoy at this time, might become the Green's master of ships. We see that Aemond is also obsessed with Harrenhal, just like Daemon. He's also got a picture of it on his wall. Alicent runs afoul of Lord Weird Footstuff, who clearly knows that she's getting it on with Criston Cole, and he's killed all their enemies inside the castle who supported the Blacks. It also seems like later he's the person to give Aegon the idea to fire Otto Hightower as his Hand of King. When Aegon enters the Iron Throne Room to answer all the petitioners, this is Martin Reyne announcing him here from House Reyne. Remember, Rains of Castamere, but that hasn't happened yet. That doesn't happen till closer to the events of the main show, before the events of Season 1. House Reyne rebelled against House Lannister. They're one of the bannermen to House Lannister. So he basically killed their entire house. And thereafter, what would happen is that for intimidation, he would play the Rains of Castamere song so people would just get freaked out because they remember what he did to House Reyne. Inside the throne room, you can also see in the background, they're building King Viserys' statue, because around all the pillars you see statues depicting all the previous kings of the Targaryen family back to Aegon the Conqueror. We meet Hugh Hammer, who's one of the Dragonseeds. He'll be important later this season. He's a blacksmith working in King's Landing. They just want to set up the idea why he's dissatisfied with the crown, why he might be willing to support Rhaenyra eventually. The showrunner said this season, just in general, they're focusing more on the plight of the small folk and the way that they react and handle everything that's happening within the Dance of the Dragons, like how it winds up affecting them and how pissed off they get at all the royals on both sides. Then we finally check in with Rhaenyra post Lucerys in the finale, and she looks like about $10, like she has not rested at all in the past 10 days, except to pass out on the beach, spending all that time looking for his body, just going mad with grief. Emma Darcy's performance in this was amazing, probably going to wind up winning an Emmy for this, or at least getting nominated. Jace winds up returning. They have their very emotional reunion where they have a good cry together, and he tells her that he's secured the North for her. This is still pretty early days for her. Like, remember, it's only been 10 days, so slowly she'll begin to think about actually making war against the Greens. All those extra troops from the North, and the North has a large number of forces, are going to come in really handy, especially the forces from the Vale. They introduced Aegon's son Jacerys in a bigger way than they did during Season 1. Like, this is the second time we've seen him, but they had to recast the child actor just because kids grow so fast. The show's playing a couple dirty tricks here to get you to care about his character even more before they give that big rug pull where they wind up killing him during the episode. Like, we see what you're doing, we watched the Red Wedding, we know how this goes. We learn that Alicent is furious with Aemond, horrified at his actions, even though Aegon still wants him around. The rest of the Green Council seems like they don't care that much either. Like, one of the big changes or additions to the book, too, is how Aemond tells the story of what really happened during that finale. He basically plays it like he killed Lucerys on purpose, knowing that if people think that he did it on purpose, he'll eventually become the most hated and potentially feared man in Westeros because he's also riding the most powerful dragon. His whole quest is to become the greatest warrior, the most feared person, the most powerful Targaryen in the realm. He also feels like he should have been king, not Aegon. Like, he's the person that wants it, whereas Aegon is like full Jon Snow, I don't want it. This is also one of the reasons why Aemond is so obsessed with Daemon, because currently Daemon has the reputation of being the most fearsome fighter in Westeros because of his past deeds in the wars that we saw during Season 1. Also, Aemond, notice, is an anagram of Daemon. So the show's sort of setting them up as two sides of the same coin. Like, they're very chaotic good, I would say. Like, not chaotic neutral, because they do advocate for both those sides, and they both do think that they're doing the right thing for their sides. But they're the ones on both sides of this that are pushing each side further and further towards civil war, the actual Dance of the Dragons, whereas a lot of people on both sides don't actually want any fighting to go down, particularly Alicent and Rhaenyra. So basically, they're the ones that are making things way worse than they need to be. But also, as we see, Aegon himself starts to go into full Joffrey mode when he lets on that Alicent, Otto Hightower, the Green Council, will not be able to control him the way that they thought they would. Kind of the same vibe as Cersei never being able to control Joffrey. Only Tywin can control Joffrey, and that's because Joffrey was terrified of him. And there's not really anybody like that here at this point in the timeline that Aegon is terrified of. As you can see, he is a very crap king, like a feckless king. So a lot of them, like Otto Hightower, Alicent, start to regret what they did, putting him on the Iron Throne. Like, maybe we should not have done that. We get another dragon dream from Helaena Targaryen, who became famous for telling the future during Season 1, even though nobody listened to her or understood what was going on. Maybe Viserys, though, like, they didn't have any scenes together where they showed it on screen, but I think the idea is that Viserys thought of her as his favorite child and knew all about the dragon dreams. When Aegon clocks her acting strange, he mistakenly assumes she's worried about the pending Dance of the Dragons and what Rhaenyra's side is going to do, but she's actually afraid of, quote-unquote, the rats, and that's her foreseeing the events of Blood and Cheese, because Cheese was a rat catcher working in the Red Keep. That's how he knew about all the secret passageways. They juxtapose this scene of Alicent in the Sept saying prayers for all the people that she's lost, along with Rhaenyra holding the funeral for Lucerys. When she mentions Allery Florent, that's her mother. She's part Florent. The other candle she lights obviously for Lucerys because she is sad that he died. During the burial for Lucerys, though, the reason why they're just burning clothes is because there's no body that she found. They only found Arax's wing, so they're burning clothes in remembrance of him. And then we get more context for how the actual events of Blood and Cheese go down. Daemon wanted to kill Vhagar to remove the Green's greatest weapon, which is a pretty sound plan. You can see from his conversation with Rhaenys, like he very clearly wants to take the Iron Throne by force. The way that Matt Smith described his character this season is that Daemon, over this period, like since the time jump, since the last major conflict, has grown fatter, lazier, and slower, and it's slowly causing him to unravel. You can kind of see that it's also creating tension between him and Rhaenyra, so you have like a Daemon versus Rhaenyra situation developing. And at least at this point, Rhaenyra isn't ready to move to open war. She wants to try and prevent as much fighting as possible, but she does want revenge for what happened to Lucerys, so they do come to the arrangement that it will be Aemond, like, get me Aemond's head. Welcome back Mysaria, who's also Rhaenyra's new Mistress of Whispers, like basically Varys' position on the Black Council here. She helps them plan, like there are many ways to fight a war. Notice another big change from Season 1, they fixed her bizarre accent. That was probably one of the biggest complaints of Season 1, if you could call it a complaint. Now she sounds more like she came from a specific place in Westeros, like they try to tie her accent down to a specific region. She comes up with the actual plan to hire Blood and Cheese. Daemon pays them off to get them inside the Red Keep, and Blood and Daemon do have history, like Blood's real name is unknown in the books. He's just remembered as Blood the Butcher. But he was a former commander in the City Watch, the Gold Cloaks, which Daemon created, who was eventually kicked out by the Greens for brutality after he killed a woman in a brothel. So he has a grudge against the Greens, and he's still kind of loyal to Daemon. And they're very careful to show you, specifically he tasked them with bringing them Aemond's head, an eye for an eye, a son for a son. During their meeting, when Blood mentions Maegor's tunnels, Maegor the Cruel finished construction of the Red Keep itself. That's why the inner part is called Maegor's Holdfast. He also had the secret tunnels and passageways built into it, and afterwards had all the builders killed so that they couldn't pass on the secrets of the existence of the tunnels. This is actually a big part too. A lot of people will be talking about this. Blood asked Daemon what they should do if they can't find Aemond. The show doesn't reveal what he says, but clearly he said something. They want you to wonder if he actually told them to kill one of Aegon's children, like Jacerys, for instance, a son for a son. But I think what actually happened here, like the reality, is that he just told them, well, if you can't find Aemond, it's a son for a son, so just find another son. And as we see them get lost eventually inside the upper chambers of the Red Keep, Cheese just winds up happening upon Helena's chambers, like, oh, well, there's a son here, let's go for this one. So again, I don't think Daemon specifically told them to kill young baby Jacerys. It just told them to get another son, and they saw another son. They sneak through the Red Keep and the secret passageways to Aemon's chambers, passing through the Iron Throne Room. Really funny WTF kind of messed up moment here where Aegon is getting drunk with his friends. Notice how unaware of them he is, like his situational awareness is at rock bottom. Working hard or hardly working. When they pass by him too, notice he also drops a couple Easter eggs, even though he himself doesn't know that they're Easter eggs. When he says that Aemond is loyal as a hound, that's a bit of a wink at Joffrey talking about the hound. Like Joffrey talked about the hound that same way too. You're loyal as a hound. That's why he called him the Hound. They begin to lose their temper as they can't find Aemond fast enough. They're already pretty crazy people to begin with, so of course they call an audible, settling their sights on Helena because she's the closest. This part of the episode goes down pretty similar to the way it did in the books. They force her to choose. She chooses Jacerys, who they then kill, R.I.P. It's probably one of the most messed up things that happens during this part of the timeline, but I don't think it's quite as bad as what happened during the Red Wedding. You can let me know, like, what is the most messed up thing that they've done on the shows? Red Wedding is still probably going to be peak. A lot of people also asking, what about her other son with Aegon Maelor? He's just not here around. It's just the twins that are here for this. They then bolt. She takes Jaehaera, the other surviving twin, running to Alicent's chambers, finding her mid-hump with Criston Cole, who then realizes the horror of what's happened. You can kind of see why they did things this way, like how ultimately they will feel blame for a lot of what happened. Criston Cole in particular, and how it drives a lot of his aggressiveness against the Blacks in retaliation the rest of the season. Like, why did he want war with Rhaenyra so badly? Well, it's because he feels guilty for what happened to Jaehaerys. There's so much stuff going on during the episode. It's like 8 little movies every single week. So if you spotted any other Easter eggs or references in the episode that I didn't talk about in this video, be sure to write them below in the comments and I'll add that to my bonus videos. My next big video will be for the episode 2 trailer. That should post Monday morning. Be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss any of that or the episode videos. And my full episode 2 video will post next week after they release it. Seriously, it is going to be a good summer. We are going to be eating good. Everybody click here for that episode 2 video. I'll update the link as soon as I post it. And click here for all my other House of the Dragon episodes. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.